I want to welcome everyone for being here tonight and look forward to seeing you upstairs in the exhibition. What we're going to look at right now is just what's been sort of happening, what has happened in my studio within the last three years. Um, and we're going to talk briefly about studio practice and where ideas are generated. Uh, And then me and Marla are going to get together and talk about the working relationship to historical textiles and ritual. But I want to start off with this piece titled From Boy to Man, Look at Me Now. Uh, and so what you're going to be seeing for the next sort of group of 10 slides is work that I'm sort of exploring uh, in terms of starting to speak a little bit about what's behind the Soundsuits. So it's going to be what you're seeing right now is what happened this year at Jack Shaman Gallery in January was this body of work that sort of deals with uh, Afrocentric sort of stereotypes and artifacts, as well as looking at these historical sort of components that really are critical to my sort of practice. And we can go forward. You can just keep going until I say stop. But what's interesting for me with this work is that working with these lawn jockeys, as you see, everything is above the head in terms of this offering. Normally, it's the lantern that's below the body, which is more passive. Here, I'm sort of thinking about the whole notion of reconciliation and sort of forcing the viewers and everyone to sort of rethink about the role and the sort of power behind this imagery and the sort of negativity that sort of supports that. So these are these sort of new sort of offerings. And as you see in the exhibition as we move forward with the slides, that they're also set up in a particular order that sort of show the sort of presentation. This piece is a piece that's in response to really spending a great deal of time talking with my grandparents and my mother about how religion, the role of religion in terms of in its relationship to the role of a servant, and how religion becomes this sort of sense of empowerment that helps an individual prevail and deal with circumstances that could be emotionally stressful. And so this is, I spend a great deal of time at the flea market, so this is me sort of building this work based on just sort of this sort of collection of things that are sort of important to me and the role in which they play within my upbringing. Forward. The piece on your right is titled Racial Profiling. A piece titled I Wouldn't Bet Against It. Again, these, as I'm out, I find that it's amazing when I'm at a flea market, I can literally build like maybe 8 pieces at a flea market. And it's really sort of trusting that sort of intuitiveness and allowing things to sort of come together and sort of be what they need to be, and sort of cutting through the chase and getting right to the pure essence of what is important in terms of material and the message. It's interesting, this penny catcher piece, can we go back, that I found, which was a game, of course, but just the power that sort of image carries. Okay, forward. And then here, this is what it looked like in the gallery. So as you came in the gallery, you were sort of basically confronted and presented these sort of offerings. And so I'm interested in that. In right now, I'm starting to sort of explore and peel back these sort of multi-layers and start to address what's really behind the work. And then we move into the Soundsuits and the sort of aspect of what's behind this work. Again, at the flea markets, I'm at the flea markets all the time, so it's not that, I'm looking for, I'm sure I've seen these porcelain birds, figurines, 100,000 times over, but, it's not, I don't know when something's going to sort of affect and be useful at the particular time in my way of thinking, but right now these are critical in my work. And then finding that sort of embroidered kitty cat pillow was fascinating and exciting, because I wouldn't sit and do that personally. And that's what I like. It's just sort of like finding the stuff that is like so like, yes! And being able to sort of, again, toy around with its relationship with these sort of interesting narratives and set up these sort of arrangements. And then this is what we have. We can keep moving forward. Also at the thrift stores, looking at collecting sconces and light fixtures that are all metal, and then cutting the floral flower purposes, and building these structures with that. But thinking about my youth as a kid and building the apparatus for the garden and working with my grandparents. So that's, and thinking about Tree of Life as a source of direction. We can move forward. That's right, I have to pay attention to you, right? We can go forward. So in my studio, I'm not really one who draws anything. It's really sort of just allowing it to sort of happen and evolve as I'm sort of exploring and pushing things around. I'm just excited about the whole idea of potential. It's like I don't know necessarily what something may be. It's not what it is until it's completed. So when you see it for the first time, it's the same as I see it for the first time. These are working with Victorian beaded floral burial wreaths, and then embellishing them with additional beaded vintage flowers. And we'll get more into this work in relationship to art history and artifacts later. But I'm in again, this Easter bunny that I found, his eyes light up. I mean, so it's just like, I see it and I'm just sort of like, I'm just amazed. I'm sort of like, I think what's interesting for me is just, how did this come about? Because I'm not thinking about making that. So again, it's just being able to take it and again, sort of being able to be playful with it and allow it to sort of move into its own sort of piece. This is a piece that's actually a video, but this is just a couple of stills from it. It's titled Adaptation, and you can see it on YouTube if you go to YouTube. Okay, forward. The piece on your right is, on the left is made out of sweaters tied in knots. On the right is all of my socks that have had holes in them. And then covering those in dryer lint, or latex paint, then dryer lint to sort of create this sort of surface. And again, thinking about this whole idea of offering, looking at medicine men as a sense of direction and inspiration. Next. um, these hot pads. I mean, they're like graphically so amazing. And I mean, I can't imagine like making these in the studio. We don't have time to make these hot pads. But the fact that they're out there and that we can have access to them is really what is fantastic. This form comes about looking at the mitre hat and looking at the Klan uniform and looking at the head of a condom. And so these sort of the intersections of all three of these has brought me to this form. So it gets a little intense. But then, most of the surfaces here are found beaded and sequined garments that we collect, that are cut up in pieces and then pieced together. So, we're working flat on the table. It's really about this sort of whole notion of assemblage and collaging and sort of, again, allowing it to work in this sort of painterly way. So we're going back in, we're stitching, we're sort of, it may be this is constructed of maybe 20 different parts of a particular garment. In this case, covering the surface with shell buttons. So in my studio, I tried to sort of stay very open. This is all of these sort of amazing embroidered needle points and it's, that we've found flea marketing and thrifting. Again, I'm very interested in the whole sort of low craft, high art, things that are discarded, viewed less than, devalued, and sort of, again, forcing me as well as my audience to sort of renegotiate their roles. Rag rugs. Just showing you this difference in terms of working with human hair still versus it in motion. And upstairs you'll see some video with that in it. But, again, thinking about like these as boogeymen to some degree. Okay, forward. But, something else, I have an amazing photographer that I work with, and, for me, when when I'm in the pieces photographing, and then I look at the results, and then I sort of see something like this, I get excited about furniture. So I'm just sort of thinking about, again, how form can dictate another way in which I may read the work or offer another type of offering. And then also I generate from this new shapes for the actual Soundsuits as well. Piece on the left is at the Seattle Art Museum. Working with synthetic raffia. This is me jumping in the air and okay, forward. This was my first Soundsuit, which was in response to the Rodney King incident, which is really the nemesis behind all of this work. So it's all out of twigs. Great sound, great smell. Forward. Working with spinning tops, noisemakers, fabulous sound, which you'll hear it upstairs. To me, this is sort of like how my mind works. Sometimes I feel like it's just this extreme. It's like just in overload, and it's just I can't manage it sometimes. But working with at the thrift store again, seeing these bags and hats many times, but wasn't necessarily interested in them, but then all of a sudden was. But what's interesting for me is that, being able to generate this sort of collection of materials and then starting to sort of build a cloth out of them, and the fact that there's already a three-dimensional component that's already placed within the structure is what's fascinating here. And then again here on your left, where you can't even identify it with the figure, it's just an object. And so again, I'm always sort of curious about this sort of shift in new sort of ideas that are generated from the work. This is where I came across an abundance of day-glow shoestrings. So, I love the fact that how that surface has invaded this form. So it's almost like, and so just what happens to, providing this new sort of textural sort of surface for it. This is from a series of pieces called, God, I forgot the name of it, but covered in buttons. But I'm thinking, I'm thinking like astronaut, I'm thinking like Pac-Man, to sort of, come to this sort of form. Next. The surface on the face is sort of a sifter that's covered in wire and bugle beads next. And so this is a little video clip of the piece we'll look at real quick. So in the video, what I'm thinking about is that, I sort of like just looking at just it as form, it from an abstract sort of perspective, thinking about it in terms of painting, this visceral surface, fiber, but yet just sort of the seductiveness of light and reflection on the material. And then the bugle beads are orange, so it's, it's just so many layers in which I'm sort of identifying with, and then also the form itself. Again, came across these abacus, which again for me is another sort of element that starts to speak about for me another way of communication and communicating. And then thinking about, the fact that I want this placed here on the face, what does that mean in terms of form? How do I sort of come to form in terms of the actual garment itself? So, I'm working a lot with my fabricator and coming up with sort of conclusions and ideas around what does this shape? How do we sort of come to this shape? It's a great sound. I think we've had some difficulties with technology today, so you can't really hear it. But we can move on to the next one. This is working with porch screening, working with doilies, and then a tag gun with buttons. Great sound in these Soundsuits. And then these are tondos. So, which you'll see a series of these. These are range anywhere from 8 feet to 16 feet in diameter. And these are all constructed out of really the remnants that we have left over from a lot of the beaded pieces. And so I approach them the same way one would approach a crazy quilt in terms of the way in which they're built. But it's just beaded and sequined garments. And then we, again, go back in and maybe restitch. Thinking about constellation as a point of reference and garden plots. This hangs in my kitchen. And then this is showing the exhibition that was in Chicago at the Chicago Cultural Center in '06. This is in Florida, Alfred University, Jack Shaman Gallery in New York. Thinking about painting here. And this was at YBCA, San Francisco, which there's a beaded globe that sits in the center of the space. And then this is a video performance room. A little video clip. This is the newest work that I'm doing, and it's titled Bunny Boy. And what's going to happen is that he will be, he's going to be moving about throughout the city of Chicago. And what will happen is that, so he will be hitchhiking. And so then it's going to be a video piece about, who stops to pick him up. And so we will video the person's mouth. And the question is, why did you pick up Bunny Boy? And so then it will move into a video piece. But I think there's a little video clip. It's not working. So anyway, oh, Buddy Boy. No, but so this is sort of what's happening right at the second in the studio. So I think me and Marla will have a conversation now. Thank you.
Wow.
Wow, what?
Well, I think it's easy to see how your work both compels and rewards our intense looking and experiencing of this amazing creativity. And I think it's all about drama and excess and tactility. And I don't think you're really going to get a sense of Nick's work until you go up to the gallery and you see these things in the flesh. But what we wanted to do is talk a little bit, especially as we're here at the Fowler Museum, some of the cultural connections between Nick's work and the kinds of things that you've seen in this museum. And when I saw your work, first in Seattle, then in San Francisco, and began to think about them in aggregate as they're displayed, many of them at a time, their remarkable diversity and intense materiality, as well as their capacity to spark a wide range of reactions to what seems to be your Nick Cave invented universe, recalls for me key ideas in a very important essay that was written by the important literary critic and Shakespeare scholar Stephen Greenblatt, called Resonance and Wonder, which he wrote for the landmark anthology Exhibiting Cultures, The Poetics and Politics of Museum Display, which was edited by Ivan Karp and Stephen Levine in 1991, and many of the essays in this volume continue to resonate, to use his word, for us in the work that we do in museums. And in that essay, he describes two models for the exhibition of works of art. One centered on this idea of resonance, and the other on wonder, which I think in your work becomes hybridized and provides us with even more dramatic results. And so I'm going to read you what Stephen Greenblatt defines resonance and wonder as, because I don't think I could say it any better than he has. By resonance, I mean the power of the displayed object to reach out beyond its formal boundaries to a larger world, to evoke in the viewer the complex, dynamic cultural forces from which it has emerged. By wonder, I mean the power of the displayed object to stop the viewer in his or her tracks, to convey an arresting sense of uniqueness, to evoke an exalted attention." End quote. And then later in the essay, the author calls this enchanted looking. And I think that this enchanted looking really captures how I see the experience of encountering your sound suits. I think they're unabashedly about wonder. But your sound suits also let us pass from wonder to resonance and give us even more from the experience than simply that of tactility and sensuality and playfulness, which is, I think, at their core. And one of the reasons I was so excited about bringing this exhibition to the Fowler Museum was really because of the ways it could provoke any number and kind of responses from our traditional audiences who are used to seeing a range of global arts in our galleries, especially those that have to do with ritual and transformation. And for new audiences, the Fowler offers the possibility of unexpected connections they might not typically make if this exhibition were shown in a more mainstream contemporary art space. So seeing your sound suits at the Fowler, I think, provokes and incites a lot of the tensions that I feel exist in your work that I would like to talk about as we move through some slides. So I thought it would be fun to put together a sequence of images that look at these cultural resonances that the work brings to mind for me, and has to do with the knowledge I've gained over the years of various kinds of cultural traditions. And what I mean to do by suggesting this is not for any of you to imagine that Nick has copied these things, or any one juxtaposition that I'm suggesting is an inspiration for it, but rather to suggest, as Nick has talked about, this remixing and finding and reformulating and reconstituting that happens with the things you find in flea markets and the things that exist in your studio. So this little presentation, this slideshow really is done in the spirit of playfulness, which is how I think you're making your work. So let's go forward and look at some images. So I, of course, started with the thing that came to mind the first when you think of the bling and the bling bling in Nick's work. And, what you're seeing in the lower right corner is a Haitian Voodoo flag. And this is actually a piece in the Fowler's collection that was made by the artist Yves Telemanque in 1994 and was a part of a really important exhibition this museum did in 1995 called Sacred Arts of Haitian Voodoo, which was curated by Donald Cosentino, who may very well be in the audience. And also work on these Voodoo flags was done by Patrick Polk. And the use of beads and sequins and baubles is intended to help attract the spirit into a ritual space. And this particular Voodoo flag represents Erzuli Freda, who is the goddess of love and luxury, which seems quite appropriate as a resonance for you. And I just couldn't help but notice the geometric patterning, the intense color, and what do you think about this?
Well, I agree. I think, this sort of, the use of pattern and how it's sort of the arrangement of that in relationship to the Voodoo flag and the actual sound suit. And then also I was sort of thinking about her and her sort of, her headdress in terms of the shape of the sound suit. Again, there's that, picking up that sort of connection there. But, Haitian Voodoo flags are a very critical sort of point of departure that also is that's very present in my work, and the seductiveness of material, in this case, in light and reflection, that really draws you into to that level of engagement is interesting to me.
I'm not sure you can all see this very clearly, but this is actually the cover of a book which accompanied an exhibition that we did here at the Fowler way back in 1985, which was called I Am Not Myself, The Art of African Masquerade. And the curator of this exhibition, Herbert Cole, is sitting in the third row. And what I love about the image, which you may or may not be able to see, is that there is a human being wearing that Cameroon grassland mask who actually was a fellow graduate student named Nee Kwakkerpoem. And this notion of I am not myself, this idea of transformation, what happens when we put on a mask, what happens when you wear your sound suits, seems to be at the core of Masquerade and your work, and it facilitates this shift from the ordinary to the extraordinary. In the case of many masquerades in Africa, from the world of the living to the world of the spirits. And it's this shield, this vehicle that I think exists in your sound suits. And I wondered, what does it feel like for you when you put on your sound suits and you perform in them? What does it do for you? What is that experience?
Well, I think, it feels, myself, if I'm working with anybody, I think the most important thing is that you have to just settle down. I really don't, I don't even let you get into the sound suits until you settle down. And what I mean by settling down is that, you're excited, but, you can put you can get excited by putting on clothes. I mean, so can you imagine putting on a sound suit?
I can't.
That, I think the first thing is that you have to realize that you're going to be forced to make a shift, a transformation that you may not even be aware of at the very present, that you are once contained within this piece. So it's important to just sort of put it on and just settle down. Don't even move. Just sort of somehow surrender to that transformation before movement is introduced. Because otherwise you're sloppy and out of control, and sometimes it's really difficult. I mean, I've seen people that have cried and just have had to come out because they just kind of got, it was so overwhelming that it just dominated their whole identity. So, it's really a force to be reckoned with, I think. But once you have made that transition, then it's extraordinary at that moment.
Next slide. So this is that moment of, you can see, is that you in that sound suit? And on the left screen is a Jamaican Junkanoo character called Pitchy Patchy, and it's made up of pieces of cloth. And this is actually an evocation of Pitchy Patchy, and it's been animated in the same way that Nick was talking about the difference in the work between the static and the performative. And I wondered, your suits are called sound suits because they make sound when they move. How do you grapple with the fact that when they're in the gallery and when they're standing still, they're obviously silent? So what is that tension for you between the sound suit as an animated, active, noisy thing?
Well, I think about, when I'm, frequent the Museum of Natural History, the Metropolitan, and I look at these artifacts that we're forced to, that are sort of taken out of context, we're forced to view them as objects, as relics, as sculpture, static. But what's interesting is that what it allows me to do in my head in terms of imagining what the possibilities are, or imagining the role in which they played within a particular culture, which, I'm fascinated by. So I think, in this exhibition, I think that's what's going to happen, that, sometimes, I don't want to always just feed you the information. I want you to do a little work. And I think it's important to sort of just imagine what this could be. What sound could this piece possibly make. And sound doesn't always have to be heard. Sound can also be created through just how pattern is set up on a surface, how it moves across the surface, how light reflects the surface can generate the feeling of sound. Can also be through feeling, through color, through texture.
Here's another comparison between another Caribbean masquerade from St. Kitts and then this knitted sound suit. And it made me think about how much your sound suits allow you to go beyond the footprint of the body, that your sound suits are very much to do with scale, of the capacity to extend the human form beyond its given shape. And what does that mean for you, this idea of scale and material and expansion?
I think first and foremost, it's really about this idea of sort of erasing gender within the sound suit, and forcing the viewer to sort of come face to face with the unfamiliar. Because for some reason, this is not, it feels like it belongs in this part of the world. To me, maybe I hope to you, but it just feels like it belongs, but we don't know where its place is. So I think that that's what's interesting to me. It's not that it is unfamiliar, but somehow it lives here in some capacity. I'm not sure how to.
The first time I saw your sound suit was in the African Gallery at the Seattle Art Museum. And as I approached it, I thought, that doesn't look African to me. But it was familiar, but it was different. And it really did capture this, what is that? Who made that? And what was that artist thinking about? And I went to the little video, which they had of you, but it wasn't you speaking. It was just you moving. And I know I was disappointed because I didn't get to hear more about the sound suits. But now I'm so happy that I'm hearing all of what you have to say.
What did you want to know?
I wanted to know everything. Next. And of course, when I think about, expanding beyond the footprint of the human form, I can't help but think of lots of Caribbean and Carnival traditions like this. This is actually a Trinidadian group who live in Toronto performing in festival, and the possibilities are endless, really. This was kind of serendipitous. I was looking through a book on masks, and I came upon this mitered mask, which comes from Bulgaria, and is part of a masquerade there. And the resemblance was just sort of knocked me out. And I don't know if you ever saw that mask, but
No.
I'm struck by the kind of circle that you see in the center of the mask and the circle that you see in Nick's sound suit. And it's interesting because that's actually a mirror. And according to the caption with the object, when the sun hits the mirror, it can deflect evil. So the masquerade actually had that purpose of, cleansing negative forces from the community. I don't know if this is anything
That's me every
that's
day.
in you every day.
I wear a mirror every day.
It's your head. Okay, next one. This is, when I saw Nick's sound suit in the catalog, I couldn't help but think of our own Nkisi Conde, which is one of the Fowler's great objects. It's actually on exhibition upstairs in our Intersections Gallery. And it's made by the Yombe peoples of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And it's a very, very powerful object that adjudicates all kinds of disputes and gains its power from the materials that have been added to it. The rope, the cloth, and the nails that are hammered into its surface every time the spirit associated with it is summoned. And when I saw yours, it looked to me like power packs were just covering the body of the sculpture. And then, of course, you told me what they really are. You want to tell people again what, and actually, next slide.
Well, I was thinking about, thinking about Medicine Man and these sort of power packs and these offerings that individuals would give to this particular figure to sort of in terms of healing as part of a healing sort of process. But what's interesting for me here is the sweater that's being applied to the back of the piece as if life has been sucked out. So, I'm sort of also playing with, again, where that line is drawn between sort of my world and the sort of other sort of world. And I think that's where it starts to sort of come together. And then it's working with balsa wood that I picked up from Lake Michigan that's also incorporated. But I was definitely thinking about that figure and these sort of fetish sort of objects as a sort of place to sort of worship and to sort of be empowered in that way.
What I loved is the knowledge that these are Nick's old socks that have been covered in dryer lint. And so the history of your history and the history of your washing your clothes and all of this is embodied.
And everyone else's clothes.
And everyone else's clothes in the same way that the great Nkisi is a kind of biography of its use and power over time. So it's, now, before I go to the next slide, I'm just going to warn some of you in the audience that this might be a bit of a shocking juxtaposition, but I really like it. It's going to keep our kind of conversation going. So this juxtaposition came to me because, of course, the tying of the rags, the use of sisal and rope is very similar in these two pieces. And upstairs in the gallery, the actual Soundsuit does not have that clown's head on it, which to me is kind of spooky and leering and scary looking. And, our Nkisi is pretty scary looking too. But what I wondered is, you don't often include a face like that or a head like that. And what kind of drove you to the decision to top your Soundsuit with something so representational?
Well, I think just as you said, I think, clowns are sort of, they make you sort of, you're not so sure if they're like friendly or happy, or there's that little bit of.
Yeah, they're scary.
There's that, and I don't like clowns, but somebody, well, it's a long story why the clown head's not there, but the things that are hanging off the garment are sweaters that have been cut up and sort of scrolled into forms and then sewn back together to build this sort of, again, surface. So again, it's that, there's that sort of human element. Again, these sort of hand-me-downs that we're sort of incorporating and reinterpreting back into the object, which for me, I just sort of did this piece where we probably did 300 sweaters and made what I considered these to be bones. So I had just finished this piece, which is just a pile of bones, but it's all sweaters.
Okay. Next slide. I wanted to shift a little bit and look at a number of masquerade traditions from Nigeria. Being a Nigeria specialist, I'm going to take my liberty of focusing on those things. And this is actually a masquerade that's in northeastern Nigeria by the Mamuye people. And the masker has on a wooden mask that is an evocation of a dwarf forest buffalo, a very powerful creature of the bush, who comes back into the community and appears at initiations and other kinds of events. And I have some really rare 1970 archival footage that Arnold Rubin, who used to teach here at UCLA, took of this mask in performance. And I couldn't help but think of Nick's Soundsuits.
It's amazing. Love it.
And when you see them move, you see how little you can tell when it's just standing there and you have a photo of.
Mm-hmm.
They're just, I think Arnold Rubin called them moving haystacks.
And then there's this, is the clip from the class here?
No, it's coming
Okay,
up.
it's coming up.
And I couldn't have done this without including the beadwork that's so famously among the Yoruba-speaking peoples of southwestern Nigeria and also the Republic of Benin. And this is, on the left, an Egungun mask. And when the Egungun appears, it is an ancestor who's coming back to the community to say farewell to the family before it goes off to the world of the spirits. And these Egungun are often covered in applique and beadwork and sequins. And the one to the left was photographed by Henry Druel, who's a foremost Yoruba scholar, and it was photographed in Benin. And you can see the same intensity of color and beadwork. And I don't know if you've seen these Egungun. Yeah.
Of course, I have.
And the relationship to, I just picked a Soundsuit, but here's, can you go to the next slide? And this is another Egungun that's actually in the Fowler Museum's collection. You could see the relationship in the shape to some of Nick's Soundsuits, that kind of long cloak. But then the next slide, you have to also remember what happens when the Egungun is in motion and the way these panels swirl out. And this is an image that was the cover of a 1974 exhibition that also was here called African Art in Motion, curated by Robert Ferris Thompson. And it was a time when the museum actually had this masquerade on a rotating carousel or something so that the flaps would fly. Mm-hmm. And it certainly makes me think of your Soundsuits in motion. And then the next one. And this one I couldn't help but think of the abacus Soundsuit. And I wondered if you would talk a little bit about this layering, this sort of you can see but you can't see, and the way that your Soundsuits kind of offer you layers of views. And you want to go to the next one? The kind of thing that happens with these Soundsuits with superstructures.
Well, I think, again, with, the abacus and a lot of the work is, these, I don't know, I sort of think about these sort of second skins or with the abacus, there's this sort of element that sort of separates me from you. And so there is this sort of barrier between the two. And sort of that as a curtain, something that, again, creates this sort of space that protects me from the outer world. And what?
In this one, do you see that layering as a sort of of course, the relationship between a cat and a bird? I mean, you're playing with
right.
That threat that cat is posing all those sweet little birds.
Yeah, I mean, of course I do. It's, I think that's where the sort of, that edge is sort of set up. It's, and I think it's that edge that I sort of like to sort of work from. where it's just sort of teetering at the top, and always sort of being open to possibility and sort of toying with things that could get me in trouble, but don't.
But don't. You're safe. And then, next slide. And I wanted to be sure to show you one of the most fantastic masquerade traditions in sub-Saharan Africa. The mask to the right is the great Ijele mask made by the Igbo of southeastern Nigeria. And I couldn't help but think of it when I saw some of these incredible superstructures that you've created for some of the Soundsuits. And the great Ijele comes out on special occasions. This is also another tradition that Skip Cole has studied, and when I read the catalog about the Ijele, Skip wrote that it takes 4 skilled workers 6 weeks to complete, working 7 days a week, 8 to 10 hours a day, and it has over 1,000 parts. And I wondered if that was familiar to you.
That's my studio. Truly, it is. Oh, yeah. It's.
And also the way that that mask is a kind of microcosm that's sitting on the understructure in the same way that what you've built on the tops of your Soundsuits are like little worlds, little universes into themselves. And the next slide. And I think some of you may remember having seen this Ijele exhibited during the exhibition Igbo Arts Community in Cosmos in 1984, but it wouldn't fit in the gallery, and so we exhibited it in the rotunda of the Powell Library here at UCLA. And it's quite magnificent, standing there like your Soundsuits do, poised to move, but sort of doomed not to. Next slide. And then a few more of these wonderful applique bodysuits that are common to southern Nigeria, which seem to me something that you may have looked at or seen. And then the last one is another part of this corpus. These are made by the Okpela people who live just east of the Yoruba in southern Nigeria. And this particular masquerader is called Knockout. And it has the name Knockout because it knocks people out. And I thought it was a perfect kind of corollary to your work, which we can also call Knockout. And then finally, I couldn't help but bring in something that I think must be a part of your creative repertoire. And this is an image of a Mardi Gras Indian, and this is Big Chief Larry Bannock of the Golden Star Hunters Mardi Gras. And these are rather among the most spectacular costumes we know from New Orleans Mardi Gras. And have you been to Mardi Gras?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I've been to Mardi Gras. I mean, I find, but, oh, yeah. I mean, it's, I'm thinking a lot more about, I'm doing a lot of performance work right now, which I'm sort of creating these sort of performance sort of research labs. So it's me sort of traveling around and working among institutions as well as community and building these sort of performance pieces that are all going to lead up to a 90s Soundsuit performance that is going to happen in a couple of years. So that is the goal, to leave my job and just to travel the world working with the community to, I'm interested in for me, my Soundsuits, they are what they are, but my real work really is sort of using them as a vehicle for change. So, that's what's the most important thing to me. And so I'm interested in being able to go into communities and work between academia and community to bring 90 Soundsuits and to do a 3-month residency where the community builds the performance. I mean, that is like the ultimate goal for me. That's what makes me the happiest.
Well, can we show that actually Nick is building community right here at UCLA, and we wanted to kind of close the conversation by showing you a clip from the work that we're doing with the dancers, the dance students at UCLA in this course that have been organized with the World Arts and Cultures Department. And Nick just spent a few hours, I think, with the class a couple days ago. And
with these kids, we got stuff over. We're sitting in the extraordinary way. So, that was just basically a matter of seconds of putting on these suits and just this transformation of them sort of connecting. So for me, that just sort of tells me the power in art, which is what I'm here to do. So
I think that says it all. Thank you very much.